Next, we're actually going to be going over some more questions. We actually have about 4 to go over. So let's just get into it. Our first one is from Jake, the Lowe's worker. He asked what he thought about just voters having votes on the Hall of Fame and if maybe players should have some votes or etc. But what I think about this is, so my initial thoughts of this is, well, if players had a vote, then they could just vote for maybe teammates and have more incentive to vote for them. But the problem is that what also happens with voters, and we actually see that a lot in MVP voting. For example, one time Fredo Martinez lost out on, I believe, MVP because a New York voter gave Jeter his first place vote in a year where Jeter was good, but had no other real MVP votes. So I can't really say that because it happens in all spectrums. What I will say is I think it'd be smart to give some players, certain players only, former players that from each decade, votes. For example, you have half of them be baseball reporters and half of the staff of voters be former players. However, you would have to update this to meet with the players that played during their era about every decade. So I would only want, if players were to vote, I'd only want it to be players that played during that era as those other players. Now, this is a little difficult since sometimes there are multiple spans of players playing it over other decades because, for example, Bonds, Clemens, and Schilling have their 10th year on the ballot. They were just on the ballot the same year as Shane Victorino, and they never really played in the same era, so it could be a little challenging, but I think that is something that should definitely be considered, and if we could somehow split the vote, I think that would be ideal. However, I don't think too many people should vote is the thing, so I think there needs to definitely be a hard cap at some point, but I think some sort of modified solution to this would be best. Next, we got a question from Spencer, the Jets fan. Which teams do you think are prepped to make a big jump from the bottom of the division to the top? Okay, great question. So we're going to go through the standings really quick and see what we have. So, first of all, what stands out is the NL East for me. Nationals are kind of an obvious. Nationals and Mets were the fifth and fourth teams in the NL East, and I predict them to finish second and third. And nothing against Miami, it's just their run differential was minus a significant margin last year. So while I think they're a good team with a bright future, and if you look at this, they actually had the biggest minus on simple rating system on Baseball Reference, which is the worst in the division, where the Mets and Nationals were projected to be about a 500 team. The Marlins should have been about 5 to 10 games under. So it took some fortune, is what I'll say, for the Marlins to get this playoff spot, and they're second in division. So right off the bat, I would definitely say the Nationals and Mets are probably, I have the Nationals going to be third, and I have the Mets probably second right now. So those are two that I definitely think will jump up. Next, we're going to go over to the AL East. Boston was fifth. They could get the third spot, but as we saw yesterday, I only project them to get fourth. So maybe, but not likely. NL Central, the top three are kind of the top three I predict again for this season, so I don't predict any big jumps there. NL Central, while I don't see any huge jumps, I see a huge fall from the Cubs, where they're first place, and they will probably be fourth place, quite frankly, this next season. However, I don't think Milwaukee is too much better. I don't think Cincinnati is too much better. St. Louis is about the same. So otherwise, I just really see the Cubs dropping as of right now. In the West, I mean, you could always say with the Angels, with Mike Trout, they always could make a jump. But with this news that Bauer is likely not going to sign with them, I'd have to imagine that it's unlikely the Angels make any jump. Hopefully they can at least get to third and maybe fight for a playoff spot, but it's honestly not too likely. And then in the West, yeah, unfortunately, it looks like the teams at the bottom are the Diamondbacks, who I don't think will be any good at all, and the Rockies, who are likely going to trade their best player. So, yeah, I mean, the only real jumpers are ironically going to be in the same division, I think, and that's going to be the Mets and Nationals. And I'll look at the other way if I see there's going to be any big falls, and the only big falls I see is going to be the Cubs. So now something always happens where we see a huge jump, and Marlins I expect to drop to fifth, but we always see some huge drops and jumps, but I don't really predict any for this upcoming season other than those two jumps in the NL East. And the NL East is going to be so crowded, it wouldn't surprise me if one of those teams finished fourth, but finishing fourth in that division isn't really that horrible considering how strong it is. So that's what I have to say about that. Not too many big jumps, but we'll likely see a couple. So we have another couple more questions here. One of these questions I'm going to break up into a different segment though. So this next question is from Reed Embiid. If you want to go watch the Prospect Sixers lose by 40, you can check out his page for that. Anyway, do you think the arbitration system needs to be changed? It seems like a lot of players make it to free agency too late, and as a result, teams end up with lots of bad contracts on the books, or players don't end up getting paid what they could have. Interested to see your thoughts. Thank you, Reed. So, do I think the arbitration system needs to be changed? For the most part, I understand it. In terms of people getting to free agency too late, I would have to say that's more about the contracts that they actually sign. Maybe that's something that could be looked at. The only real thing I would probably want to change about the arbitration system is the years of control rule, which is basically, we all know that Chris Bryant has been held in the minors an extra year. That almost happened with Pete Alonso, but the Mets luckily brought him up and he broke the home run record for a rookie, so luckily that didn't happen. But there have been plenty of cases where players have been kept in the minors for like a month during the new season, and it's given the team an extra year of control. I really don't like that. I think that's really bad for the sport to have these players not in the majors right away. So that is the main thing I would change. So if you do that, all these players get out into free agency a year sooner. And that would be ideal, obviously. But otherwise, do I think the arbitration needs to be changed? Other than that, I don't really think so. It's not a perfect system, but the problem is I don't have a solution, so I can't knock it too badly. That's just because it's simply between them. Listen, the contracts are supposed to be for the low dollars, and then they are. And then the players have the option for the extension, and if not, they go through an arbitration, which often doesn't really pay them what they would get on the open market, but it's not really supposed to. So maybe the arbitration hearings could be improved so the players earn a little bit more, but it's also important for the teams to pay as little as possible, quite frankly. So the only real thing I would change is I would try to make it we get rid of that rule about control time, and other than that, I think it's a fine, not great, but a usable system.